And we are live from Ibiza for Café Diem with your host, Michelle Reed, and my guest, Jo Youle. In this video, we are going to be talking about coffee, naturally, Ibiza and coffee, as well as some yoga, movement, and of course, the art of podcasting with the podcast queen of the island, Jo Youle. So you want to stick around, you want to press subscribe, and you want to share the love, and away we go. Jo, how are we this morning? How are we?
I'm in San Francisco. I mean, how do you think I am?
You're hanging loose in San Francisco, man. I love it. And do you have your coffee nearby?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I haven't had any coffee yet at all today, which is rare for a girl like me. I'm normally high as a kite by 9 a.m. So I actually saved myself for the very first sip with you.
Oh, amazing. I just had one. So let's do it. Let's really honor our coffee together.
First of all, I have to actually put my fresh ginger juice in. Which is
it's actually, you have like a disappearing cup, which is quite fascinating.
This was the fresh ginger that I juice, and I put that in my black coffee in the morning at the moment. Which
I like it. Tell me about it. Why do you do that?
I just got really into fresh ginger in the morning when I gave up coffee, and now I'm back on it again. I feel like it just gives things an extra bit of spice.
Cool.
I think the more of a kick I can get in the morning, the better lately. So
literally a little extra bit of spice.
Yeah, I like it. And some cardamom pods in the cafetiere in the filter before I put the plunger down, just to take away a little bit of the bitterness. Cool. I think Spanish coffee is quite bitter sometimes compared to normal coffee. So I just like the flavor of cardamom and ginger together.
What's brewing though? What kind of coffee are you drinking?
I would like to say it's something really fancy. I would normally be drinking Mecca coffee, but my boyfriend has just been here for a few weeks and he left a packet of the Café Diem,
cool.
The local coffee. So it feels good to support local, but ultimately that is quite a bitter coffee, which is the cardamom pods are needed and a bit of ginger to take the taste away because it's not my favorite.
I think it's quite a dark roast, isn't it?
Mm.
Last week on episode 17 with Sheila Faulkner, she had some beans that she grinded, and they were Café Diem Ibiza as well. So our second guest, back to back with Café Diem Ibiza, or Café Ibiza. I don't even think it's Café Diem Ibiza. Café's Ibiza. Cool. Noted. Cool. So for people who don't know who Jo is, as I said, the podcast queen of the island, known worldwide for her wellness platform called the Reset Rebel, which we're going to get into today, as well as a music journalist for quite some time, I believe about 10 years in London prior to moving to Ibiza. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I was probably a music journalist for about 7 years for BBC Six Music, and then I did a little bit of that at Virgin Radio before I went over there as well. Did a lot of the entertainment stuff, a lot of hanging around on red carpets in Leicester Square, waiting, being amused by the perverted paparazzi. That was always, that was the only entertainment available when you're hanging around for like 6 or 7 hours, just kind of watching the kind of filthy tricks they have up their sleeve to capture the sexy women as they walk down the red carpet. It was always highly amusing. But the music journalism thing was the last sort of 5-6 years.
Okay, cool. And which then brought you into Jo JoGa Beats. So the music, combining the breath and the music and the movement, which I've been very fortunate to be a part of a couple times. Not enough. I don't feel like I get enough of your yoga sessions on the island. Maybe you'll be doing more of them come winter. And so that led you into that as well, I suppose.
The music was definitely the catalyst and the kind of inspiration behind creating the movement and the sequencing. And the first teacher training I did, it was kind of very free and very, it was a vinyasa flow teacher training, but it was very much kind of like a way where we could develop our own idea. And my idea was always to link the movement and the music, more importantly, to the breath. Which was slightly complicated. I love to make things complicated. So it was kind of like a highly choreographed sort of sequence that timed the beat of the music with the movement. So we're like moving in bars of 8, obviously the way music is created, inhaling and exhaling for counts of 4. Mm-hmm. So it was quite a fast-paced, frenetic, kind of slightly mental yoga class.
Doesn't sound like you do.
With the DJ, and even I struggled to keep up with it at times. It was way too much. And then obviously as the years went by, and I realized that people, they just need the opposite in Ibiza. They think they want these crazy, wild, mad vinyasa flow classes, but actually what they really need is something really relaxing, because it's not a relaxing island. Particularly the kinds of people that were booking me were hungover, on come downs, had been out, or were just about to go out. So obviously that class, worked in that scenario, but predominantly I was kind of like the come down queen, I used to call myself, because I used to sort of sort people out the morning after, the night before. And then it kind of, became more of like a flow to music. After I did my 500-hour teacher training with a dancer from New York. So she was a choreographer, and everything was highly sequenced in a very dancey way, but it was just much more about massaging the fascia in the body and getting into the flow and kind of really getting under the skin to move in non-linear forms of movement and frames of movement and really kind of get into the places and ways that we don't normally move as humans, more animalistic kind of movements.
Cool. Who was the teacher? That sounds incredible.
Her name, you'd love her actually. She was called Julie Martin.
Okay.
She's American and she lives in Hawaii.
Cool. Even better.
Yeah, she's just cool. And I met her in India a few times. She had a studio in the north of Goa, near Asagao, called Brahmani Yoga. Mm-hmm. And so I used to go there a lot. And one of my very, very, very big inspirations when I very first started to teach, a lady called Sally, who I used to go to her class in Brighton. Mm-hmm. And she was like 65 when I first found her. She was like Madonna. She was built like a very, very fit older lady, muscles upon muscles. And I was just like, wow. But her class went around the mat and sort of basically built the sequence to music. And each time we did another round, she would add on these extra parts of the sequence. It was almost like a dance class.
Super cool.
With, yoga practice included, obviously, to music. And that's where it all began for me, because as soon as I started to go to that class, I was absolutely hell-bent on trying to recreate that, but in my own way.
Cool.
And I found out she did her training with Julie. And, after I did my first flow course and came here and realized I didn't quite have my idea nailed, I went back and, I did another month, which is very intense for a 300-hour to add on to your 2, in terms of just 1 month to cram 300 hours in. A lot of philosophy. I also had a philosophy teacher from India, a guy called Emil Wendell. And we did a lot of pranayama, a lot of meditating, like 2-3 hours a day in the morning before the sun came up, breath work. And it was brutal, but it was incredible, because I think, having done the training in India, you want to try and bring in, of course, it's going to be a more relaxed, dancey, kind of flowy kind of class, but I'm, a great believer in trying to keep some of those ancient practices and methodologies that clearly work to relax people before they kind of, get into their body, because, we spend all of our time living in our heads. Mm-hmm. And, my aim is to try and distract people with the music and the movement to get them back into this space right here. And that's, that's where we should all be living and breathing and moving from, is our hearts.
I love it. I've been saying this a lot lately, is we have to listen to our body and just ignore our mind, because everything that's going on right now is really, really, it's a good thing to kind of, a good motto to live by. I think just give your mind a bit of a rest. I would love if you could do some of these classes this winter, this autumn, this winter, maybe not as in depth or as intense as you said, but I think we are missing dancing on the island like tremendously. And I've been incorporating that in my PT classes, like getting people to dance again. I think that would just be incredible. I think everybody would lap that up. Jo, would that be something of interest to you?
I mean, for sure, but
you have time.
I've been here for 8 years, and I was keen as mustard. Literally was so all over it when I first arrived. In terms of the teaching, I was like the keenest person in town. But I think it's quite hard, and this is what kind of put me off. Making studio classes is to try and build a following and get people to commit in Ibiza. Mm-hmm. This is not an island. No. In my humble opinion, where people commit like they do in London and places where they're really stressed, because they're not as stressed, which is brilliant, amen to that. But B, I don't think they have such a regular routine or rhythm. They can't go, right, every Wednesday I'm going to be there at 9:30. You know, there's so many interchangeable factors, people's lifestyles, thank God, are not as, you know, as routine as they are in other places in the world. And I think people struggle unless they are mums on the run, dropping their kids off. Obviously, that's not really, you know, a changing event. It's regular. But even that hasn't been happening recently. And I think, you know, if 8 people said, yeah, sure, I'll commit to that, no problem. But it was interesting for me because last week I got booked for a load of private classes. Prime example, I go in, it's a £10 million villa. It is absolutely, my jaw literally had to, you know, I had to try and scoop it back off the floor as I walked through the electric gates. And it was stunning. I was blown away. And then, you know, there were 6 people in the class, 5 guys, 1 girl. The CEO of the London healthcare company had sent them over from England, and they loved my class, raved about it. They texted me, they asked me for the playlist. They were completely into it. The second class, 3 days later, there was only 1 person there. It was the woman. And the 5 guys had all been out and got absolutely, you know, ruined the night before. And they didn't make it, you know, and they were the ones that raved about it the most. So, you know, people come here with the best of intentions. They want to get fit. They want to get healthy. They want to do all these wonderful things. But when push comes to shove, and I don't blame them, they probably had a really stressful 6 months working their, you know, bottoms off, trying to get the right healthcare professionals into the right scenarios currently. And I, you know, hats off to them. And I praise their work enormously from the bottom of my heart. But I, you know, people don't commit in the same way that they do in other places in the world. And that is what makes me not want to commit and put my time in the diary to be at a certain place at a certain time. You know, pop-up events, private classes, retreats, no problem. But I think, you know, to actually give up my time and say I'm going to be there for 2 hours, 3 hours out of my day, it's not, you know, and then 2 people come, 3 people come. It's not, for me, it doesn't feel worth the exchange. So that's, you know, words from my heart and my discovery over 8 years of being here. So,
and it's good that you have the boundaries, right? So I think that's important to have boundaries. And if you tested it, and I do 100% agree as well, that we don't have a routine here generally. So yeah, for people to, like, every day is different, isn't it? There's not, like you say, after work on a Friday, I'm going to go to Joe's class. So I understand. However, I'm going to take you up on it and you're going to do a class for me, even if it's just me and you.
I'm all over that. You know, you will not find a more excitable person when it comes to teaching that class. I love it. It absolutely lights me up. You know, I was absolutely buzzing last Thursday after that class. The whole day, right until the moment I went to bed, because I hadn't taught. You know, I mean, I was teaching in February when I got locked down in India. I went out there to teach on a retreat in February, and I got stuck. I couldn't get back again. And you know, one of the women upstairs in my apartment blocks was another teacher trainer, and she was amazing. And you know, she was teaching mornings and I was teaching evenings, or the other way around. But I was teaching every single day for those, you know, 7 weeks that I was there. Mm-hmm. And people, well, they didn't have anything else to do, so they were committed. And to create that relationship with those 8 people of women that used to come every day, we introduced your wonderful idea, this idea of bringing a coffee down to the yoga deck, having a coffee together, having a chat, having a catch up, talking about how we were feeling. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we were all a bit stressed about the fact that we're all stuck in India, you know, had all the latest kind of catch ups. And then we'd do yoga practice, and it was just amazing. It really, really, really made me happy to have a community.
I like it. Café Diem in India. But from India, Jo, I want you to spill the beans on Ibiza, because your passion for Ibiza is immense. So I want you to tell me your first time, or what brought you to Ibiza to leave London. So story there, please.
I don't know if you really want to know about what I got to the first time.
No, I want it to be not X-rated, like GP. I'm sure it had something to do with dancing all night long, falling on your hotel bed when you got back, that sort of thing, like most guests. But yours will be unique, I'm sure.
A lot of that went on. There's no denying. My ex-boyfriend actually used to work for Mixed Mag. He was features editor, and we used to come over. You know, didn't have to pay to get in anywhere. So of course, you know, we'd go to as many places as possible, see as much as possible, get involved as much as possible with a big group of friends. We hire a big old villa and come for a week, and not a lot of sleeping tended to happen. But actually, when I started to work for BBC Six Music, I started to make these like mini documentaries for this show called The Edge with Steve Harris, who was a really amazing presenter. Used to kind of feature a lot of alternative music. It wasn't just rock music. And at the time, that was on Virgin Radio, and then he moved to XFM. So, yeah, basically, I used to come over and do some little features, you know. Then, of course, Ibiza Rocks was starting up. So you had like Maximo Park, you had the Kaiser Chiefs. And I came over and I made a few little mini documentaries with him and for him, and basically got to hang out with those two bands I just mentioned. And that actually was probably my favorite ever trips, to have a real purpose in mind and a mission to record and capture this whole new phenomenon on the island that no one ever thought would catch on. And actually, you know, it's still going strong now, and it's such an amazing event. And actually, I would say those are my favorite trips back in my 20s, when I was kind of recording some of those. But I'll never forget, actually, and I shouldn't, you know, we've just been talking about yoga and it's a Wellbeing Wednesday, but I was interviewing Gary Lightbody from Snow Patrol at the Rock Bar in San Antonio, and we've been taken out to a big old press dinner. And basically, I just remember sitting on one of those high stools at the bar, chatting to him. I just totally fell off my stool in the middle of the conversation. And the audio, when I listened back to it, I was absolutely ashamed. And Ben Jones, who's like one of the presenters on Virgin Radio, basically got wind of what had happened to me, and managed to find that tape and managed to broadcast it nationally. So that was one of my highlights of Ibiza, that got broadcasted to the nation, and completely and utterly.
Was it because you'd had too many strawberry daiquiris?
Oh, completely. But there was we went to Bambuda for dinner, but I'd never been there before. And like the food, you know, the wine was just flowing and the drinks were just kept on coming. But there was just no food. There was no food. And it was like almost 11 o'clock by the time I went to go and do this interview. I just hadn't really eaten. And by the time we ate, it was way too late. So the damage was already done. But yeah, some good times were had in Ibiza. And, you know, it wasn't until my kind of early 30s that I discovered this island and went north of Ibiza town for the very first time in my life after more than a decade of coming here. And then I've kind of, you know, just really realised there's a whole other side of the island. I went to your previous guest, Toby Clark's event, Healing Ibiza at Zaro, and we just immersed ourselves in all the yoga classes and the meditation and the Good News newspaper and all the wonderful things that, you know, I all really, really, really wanted in my life. So as soon as I realised my favourite place on the planet had another side to it, I was like, oh, it's time to leave London.
Yeah, totally. Gave your liver a break.
I don't know if that happened. Not to begin with.
Not right away. No, definitely with the coffee as well. I imagine our liver is still having to have a little process of our good old coffee that we're drinking today. Cool. I like it. I like it a lot. I think I've heard that story about you at Bambuda, and it's like there was no food. I think actually it's quite a story that a lot of people tell. There's never enough food at Bambuda. There's always too much drink. So a lot of people leave there quite drunk on their way to wherever they're going. So luckily they were open this year. That was good. We went there a couple of times. I don't know if you got a chance to go there because you've been off the island quite a lot this year.
I have. Yeah. I know. Yeah, it's been one of those. It's hilarious. I think at the beginning of the year I found, you know, my dream home, which I'm sitting in right now, overlooking the sea in paradise. And I thought, you know, I'm not leaving this island this year. I'm not going to go to, you know,
so you're
India.
in San Francisco.
Sorry? San Francisco with a like, babe.
Coffee hasn't kicked in yet, obviously.
I sort of feel like I'm on a magic carpet, or maybe there's some mushrooms in there and I don't know where I am anymore. I'm quite enjoying it though.
Yeah, that's important.
I was doing some interviews last week and I was actually in Belgium, and I just had these grey curtains and grey view outside with a crane in the background, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to put some jazz in the background and jazz it up. How are you liking it?
I like it. It's much better than what California looks like right now, that's for sure.
A bit smoky. You might not be able to actually see my face.
Yeah. I'm actually really glad that you're not in California, to be absolutely honest with you, that you are on the island. You're back after being locked down in India. You deserve to be back.
1.3 billion people in a country where you can't even lock most of the doors over there. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, obviously there's lots of affluence and lots of, you know, amazing career people there doing some incredible things. And, you know, you go to those big cities like Mumbai and Delhi, and there's a lot of houses that are just very, very much like shacks.
Yeah. It's because it held a lot of people there as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's bad. I mean, it's not as bad as America, but it's, you know, it's, I think the last count, I read it this week or last week, it was like 4 million people. But out of 1.3 billion, I think basically everyone I've spoken to over there right now is absolutely fine. And when I was there back in February, there was nothing, you know, there was nothing to worry about. Not in the state that I was in. And obviously India is a very, very, very big place. Mm-hmm. So I didn't feel unsafe there. In fact, apart from the fact that there were just no flights back to Europe, I was very happy in India. I'm always very happy in India. It's like my other favorite place in the world, beginning with I. Mm-hmm. And I would happily move there.
Why didn't you do any podcasting from India, Jo? I want to bring this around to podcasting because I really want to pick your brain for the few minutes we have to talk about podcasting. So why didn't you do any podcasting while you were in India?
Because The Reset Rebel is a show about wellness professionals who live in Ibiza. They've moved here from another part of the country, just like I did, and they reset their path in life to live here and to live a different lifestyle, to help other people through the work that they now do by living here. Mm-hmm. And, I had a stockpile when I first arrived there of interviews for the sort of 3 weeks that I was due to be there. But then I ended up getting stuck there for more than 2 months. Okay. And then I was stuck, in Belgium after that for another 2 months on my way home. And I didn't have any interviews lined up. And, as much as I love this kind of Zoom setup and I love what you're doing with the wonderful Café Diem, it's, for me, I'm a traditional lady, as I explained before. And when I worked for BBC and Virgin Radio, everything was done in quality. So my podcast is done face to face. It's done in WAV format in terms of audio file. I like high quality audio, and that's how I like to present that that conversation. So I think this is great, but for me, I'm all about the audio. I love a bit of visual, but as you can see, it's just incredible. It's weird. Looking at myself.
I knew this would be weird because we talked about this, how potentially the podcast would eventually have a video element to it, your podcast. Mm-hmm. And I see that you're not there yet.
Well, I've actually recorded quite a few. For me, I spend so much time editing the audio, probably at least one full working day per week do I spend doing that. And then I'm like, right, so now I've got this amazing video. But, I did an interview with Lou Rhodes, this wonderful singer-songwriter, musician from the band Lamb. She lives in England, in the north of England, and we did this wonderful interview. I was like, that's going to take me another half day or maybe more of my time to put that together as well. And I just, I don't get paid for doing the Reset Rebel. It's an outreach program. It's a charity. It's a wellness platform to connect people with therapists, yoga teachers,
breathwork facilitators,
sex coaches, life coaches, you name it. They're all here in Ibiza, and they all are absolutely hilarious and brilliant in their own, crazy forms, because they've all come here from other walks of life, like they're bankers or they're lawyers, or they reset their life to live here and live a different life, and they want to put something back. And that's what I find so beautiful about that podcast, is uncovering and unraveling that story. And, I think that I just really enjoy kind of finding people that want to work with those kinds of people through the podcast. That's part of what we do, is we hook up people suffering anxiety, depression, grief, cancer survivors with people that really, really need that help that maybe can't afford it. So that's an interesting facet of that whole program. And that's what makes it worth me doing it, once a week for free. But we are looking for a sponsor. So if anybody's out there and wants to help us with that, we'd love to hear from you.
Let us know in the description box below who Jo should ask for a sponsor. But what I want to do for the people who are, now more than ever, people are getting into podcasting and what we're doing. So lockdown did really breed that, didn't it? If you were to give, because I'm mindful of your time, Jo, 3 top tips for somebody who wants to get into podcasting right now, what would they be? Coming from a professional, what would be your 3 top tips for getting into podcasting in 2020, the end of 2020?
I think a lot of people have had a lot of time to put some thought into their ideas, and they probably, come up with something that they'd like to do to tell their story. And, I think there's never been a better moment in time to think about doing a little project and to, create your own little community like you have with this. But I think, you have to be realistic, and you need to sit down and work out. I think the biggest problem is pod fade. It's when a podcast starts to publish and then basically people realize how much work's involved and they give up. So, there's over 1 million podcasts now on iTunes. Over half of those are no longer in production. When I first started researching podcasts in Ibiza, there were no speech-based podcasts that was actually live on iTunes at that moment when I started the Reset Rebel. So, that shows you that people have all of the best intentions, just like they do with their yoga practice, but then they realize they don't have the time to make it. They don't have, 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours per week to dedicate purely to that one thing. So first of all, evaluate your time. Have you got that time? Are you going to be able to commit? Are you going to continue doing it? Because if not, I would say don't even bother starting.
Yeah, I get it. I hear that. It's the same with video as well. Like what we're doing, the video takes a hell of a lot as well. And there's a lot of people that say, I wish I could do that. But when it comes to push comes to shove, they're not consistent as well. That could possibly be your second one.
Continuity is massive. You've got to put your podcast out with, I was teaching the podcast training yesterday. So every month at the Hub Ibiza co-working space, I put a 2-day training together. People can come on that course. I absolutely love teaching it. It literally is, something I enjoy doing just as much, if not more, than yoga teaching these days. And, one of the main things, like one lady was there, she had all this idea, she had the name, she had the logo, she had everything sorted. And then she pretty much changed her mind completely by the end of day one, which is when we go through the creative process, getting really clear on your idea and really mapping it out, the format, the structure, the guests. How are you going to put that together? What are your continuity points? How are you going to create that introduction? Where are you going to do it? What's going to be the main theme? Who's that one listener that you're speaking to? How are you going to address them? What's your message? What voice are you going to use to really get them to engage? And that's what you're looking for with a podcast. You're looking to create that narrative, but something that people like the Reset Rebel, it's people sharing that story of how they went from A to B. And it's got some very inspirational points along the way. Maybe someone's an entrepreneur, they've got their own business. Maybe they've come through a big trauma in their life to then want to give back. Maybe they got over something. Maybe they lost something along the way. Your podcast needs to have a theme. It needs to have a specific subject like you do with this, where you dive in deep each week and you give something to that person through that story.
Cool. Clear. So I got pod fade, which is interesting. I also picked up on evaluate your time. I picked up being clear on your idea, continuity, and for consistency on my end. And then also making sure that you're very clear on your theme and that you're adding value to your fans or to your subscribers or whoever it is. So that's about right?
That is the main touch points for sure.
Cool.
Just a very quick one. I watched the Paris Hilton documentary last night. I got back 2 days of teaching. I never watched TV ever. It was on YouTube. It went live. It was their first ever big reveal. And I'd seen a few posts on Instagram as I was whizzing around. I was like, I'm just gonna numb out and watch that. Perfect. And it was what she shared is something, I'm not even going to ruin it for you. It's something about something that really big that happened to her in her life that made her the way she is. She's not this influencer with no brain, no heart, no intelligence, no connection, who just is all about the fancy clothes and the fancy lifestyle. Actually, something very, very, very traumatic happened to her in her life that made her that way, made her unable to have a relationship, made her unable to connect to other human beings, that made her want to smash life, make as much money as possible and prove to the people that created this situation for her that she could be a success in this lifetime and she would ever need to rely on anybody else or put herself in a situation that made her feel vulnerable again. Now, the narrative of that, when you see that, when you have this kind of preconception about who somebody is, what they do, what they're about, what their story is, because we just, we look at it and we judge it on Instagram, it couldn't be further from the truth. But until she shared that story, everyone is going to think of Paris Hilton from the simple life, this, really dumb, woman who really isn't connecting to life in the way that we would expect somebody maybe of that stature with that much money. And that's why it's just wow, how beautiful that she felt able to share that story. And that's what is so valuable and incredible and amazing about women who share their stories through podcasting, through your idea, through any of these platforms. And I think, stories and narrative and sharing are what we need to be doing right now, because I think everybody feels very alone, everyone feels very disconnected. But, by popping 2 little headphones in your ears in the morning and going for a walk in nature and maybe listening to somebody else who's been through something similar, through a podcast or whatever it's going to be. Mm-hmm. It's just a really lovely way to make people feel like they're not alone. And that's why I love women in podcasting in particular, because I think you just dive a lot deeper sometimes into conversations of more, emotion and feeling. And those are the kinds of stories that you're going to get much more reaction from and to, and more engagement with your listeners, the more personal you can make it. So, I could talk for hours about this stuff. I know that you haven't got the time, but
yeah. And also I know that you are short on time, and we do try to keep this to 30 minutes. So what I'm going to say now is Jo has landed the plane. Everybody can take off their seatbelt.
In San Francisco.
So it's we're gonna wrap up, because I know everybody's got we've got stuff to do, don't we? You've got to go and spread the message about more podcasting, because there's people out there that want it. So they can find you at the Hub next month, I believe, if people want to get involved.
On the 12th and 13th of October. It's basically the third Monday and Tuesday every month at the Hub. It's a 2-day training. And, yesterday was so amazing to be back there and be face to face, because I've been doing Zoom trainings with people all over the world since this began. Mm-hmm. But, and I have absolutely no problem with doing that. But there's something very, very, very magical that happens. Yesterday, 3 women in a room. There was 2 women that I was training, and, we buddy up. And there's some accountability by going through that process, and it was just so amazing, the bond that was created by the end of those 2 days between the 3 of us. And, I'm so excited to see those projects go live next month. The advert gets launched, the trailer's launched, and it's a very
proactive. Jo.
Sorry?
I don't want you to give too much away. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link for this next training in the description box below. And we're going to get everybody who's interested in podcasting to contact you directly or read the Facebook event. So don't give too much away. I want people to be there. I want there to be some an element of surprise. All we know is that it's a great thing to do if you're looking to get into the podcast game. What are we? September 2020. Yeah. Good.
I'm glad somebody knows which month we're in, because
I know. I do
most days these days, let alone what day it is.
Cool. So on that one, Jo, I'm gonna close our coffee chat just when you're getting really high on caffeine.
Yes, thanks for that. Well, luckily I'm going to meet somebody to go for a bike ride for the next 2 hours, so I'm high enough to cycle up a few hills now, which is good.
Good. And what I'm going to do is just make a mention that we had Sheila Faulkner on last week, who was teaching us the art of living gracefully, with gratitude and with purpose. And Jo very much as well lives with purpose, is quite clear. Next week on the 16th of September, so Wellbeing Wednesday, we're going to have Hayley Field, who is the food ninja. And she's going to tell us how we're going to talk about intermittent fasting. We're going to talk about fat loss, and we're going to talk about sustainability for life. So none of this shit that you just go do like a 10-week course and then, you're going to lose your fat and that's the end of it. So we'll have Hayley on. So she's no nonsense when it comes to that as well. And what I would like for everybody is, if you have any guests that you would like to see on Café Diem, I would love for you to send me an email. So it'll be in the description box below as well. They will have to have an affinity to Ibiza. So either they've lived in Ibiza or, they've traveled to Ibiza, but something to do with Ibiza, because that's very important for us on Café Diem. And then lastly, so if you want to get a hold of Café Diem, you've got Instagram, Facebook, and SoundCloud, Café Diem Ibiza. So let us know in either of those DMs or whatever who you think could be a new guest on Café Diem. And then lastly, quick plug for myself, because I always run out of time before doing this. And it's looking, if you want to get control of your health and fitness, and sometimes if it feels challenging, I help women build strength, lose fat, and live a much happier, joyful life. So with balance, which is really important as well. So that's Unconditional Love Ibiza. And what I would like you to do in any of our socials, including Jo's socials, which I will tell you in just 2 seconds, if you can drop a little yoga emoji in her DMs, on one of her posts, in her email box, or whatever it is, just to let us know that if you've watched this talk, that would be fantastic. So if you're looking to get a hold of Jo, she's got a couple here. So we've got the Reset Rebel on Facebook and Instagram. And then of course you've got the resetrebel.com. So you'll find everything you need to know about podcasting. Of course,
It's resetrebelproductions.com. The resetrebel.com is the podcast page. So,
okay, cool. So the resetrebelproductions.com. Clear. And then, of course, if you're looking to get a hold of her for her movement and yoga, we have JoGa Beats Ibiza on Facebook. We have JoGa Beats on Instagram. And then I'm going to say jogabeats.com, and then about, if you put that in, you'll find her there as well. So you can definitely get a hold of her. And you've got movement, you've got podcasting. You could do it together, perhaps, a moving podcast.
There are podcasts with the full yoga practices on there on the Reset Rebel. So
that sounds fantastic.
Bit of a combo.
We're going to wrap up today, Jo. I really appreciate you. Guest number 19 in the Café Diem catalog, which is absolutely mental and very relevant for this time right now. So I thank you for being a guest on Café Diem. Yeah, for having a coffee. So brewed in Ibiza for a love of black coffee, well-being, and early mornings. This is Café Diem, and we are signing out for another Wellbeing Wednesday with my guest, Jo Youle from the Reset Rebel or JoGa Beats. Adios.